Hello everyone and welcome to Grid Live pre-race and our special presentation for the 2023 Daytona 500. The Great American Race will kick off the 2023 NASCAR Cup Series, the 75th championship season, and we are here to preview the race and storylines entering today's race. I'm Joshua Burge, and with me are Kobe Lambert from the Podium Finish, Ben Schneider and Matthew Bro as well. We invite you to comment with your opinions and questions in the chat room, and also click the link and invest in the Grid Network. Join Colin, Mark, Tichelle and Robin in investing each month with us as well. And our newest Patreon member, David, will read your name out each episode as well, and consider giving a one-time contribution on Buy Me a Coffee. The link to all that is in the video description. Gentlemen, for the 65th time, the NASCAR Series will run the Daytona 500. It's the 75th season of NASCAR, and many are talking about what happened 25 years ago during NASCAR's 50th season when Dale Earnhardt won the 500 after 20 years of trying and frustration. We have seen several past Daytona 500 champions in this year's race. That's unbelievable. 33 drivers looking for their first victory in the 500. And the driver starting first is hopeful to finish in the same position at the end of 500 miles or longer, of course, if we get into overtime. That is Alex Bowman, who starts on the front row for the 6th straight year alongside him teammate Kyle Larson. Both of them had different strategies in the dual races from Thursday night. Alex Bowman fell back, took care of the car, and even the pit crew practiced a 4-tire pit stop. Kyle Larson was up front all night fighting for the lead, and up until the last lap was in contention to win. However, that night, no adjustments were made to the cars since qualifying. Since then, adjustments have been made after practice time. Coming to Ben and Matthew, first of all, does Larson have an advantage over Bowman, considering he raced for the win Thursday night, compared to Bowman taking it easy?
He might have a slight advantage. I might give him that. He tried his best to throw away the front row start on the final lap there with what happened with Todd Gilliland getting out of shape, and Gilliland ending up saving the car, very reminiscent of what Kyle Busch did in the Budweiser shootout many years ago. But, I don't know that it's too much of an advantage at this track in particular. We're going to see drivers coming and going to the front and the back of a draft all day. There certainly might be something to be said for having some fresh experience racing up front and racing in a draft. But I think Alex Bowman certainly did the right thing by playing it smart, and I think he had to in many respects. We know that car was certainly trimmed out for qualifying, so the handling over multiple laps in the draft was not going to be great, so he just took it easy and preserved his front row start. But then again, Bowman's hardly a rookie. He's been here before. He's, what is this now, his 6th year starting on the front row, so he's used to this kind of environment. I don't know that Kyle Larson necessarily has a huge advantage over him just because he got a handful of laps competing in the draft and the dual races on Thursday night, and Bowman really didn't because he fell to the back to preserve his car. We'll see. It might come into play here, but I don't see it as a massive advantage that's going to hurt Alex Bowman in any way.
Yeah, and personally for me, it's kind of hard to say that either of these drivers have an advantage at this track, considering Kyle Larson and Alex Bowman at Daytona really have some of the worst statistical average finishes here, with Bowman being like around 18.5 and Larson being around like 21.8. Even though they start on the front row a lot here, especially Hendrick Motorsports, they never really seem to get it done. So it's kind of hard to say which one has an advantage, because sometimes the duels don't really matter. I mean, drivers can come from anywhere. In the past 10 years, they haven't really come from 20th back on, and I know we'll be discussing if Kyle Busch can do that today, but I think it was good for Bowman to get that 4-tire pit stop. My cat says hi. And it was good for him to get that 4-tire pit stop in, and it was great for Kyle Larson, who's not statistically great at super speedways. I think his first top 5 was actually last year, to be able to run up front. Maybe Larson has the advantage, but if it's anything like we saw in qualifying, and same with Austin Hill in the Xfinity Series being so much faster than the rest of the field in qualifying like Bowman was, I think we might see Bowman take this advantage over Larson, in my opinion.
And before we talk about the adult Candyman, I believe we do have some comments in the chat room that we're going to display. Hello, Amber. How are you doing today? Happy Daytona Day. You're really excited for the Daytona 500, 75th season of NASCAR. Bring it on. Really excited to see quite an active chat room today. I know Demas has been really counting down. He said, as you said, I believe on Thursday night, Demas, you said this as well. It's the final Daytona 500 for Kevin Harvick before he's going to be joining Clint Boyer and Mike Joy in the Fox Sports booth in 2024. And as I mentioned, the adult Candyman, as Kyle Busch has dubbed himself now due to his new sponsorship at RCR. The one driver many saw as a contender and a Chevrolet was leading Duel 2 until he got spun out by Daniel Suarez. So Kyle Busch is going to be in a backup car listed in 36 starting position. The furthest back anyone has come to win the Daytona 500 was Matt Kenseth in 2009. He was originally going to start 39, but had to go to a backup car and won from 43rd starting position. And with 40 cars in the field today, it won't be possible to break that without a penalty or a backup car. 2007 Daytona 500 winner Kevin Harvick came from 34th place. The winner of the Daytona 500 has come from 30th or worse a total of 6 times in the history of the Great American Race. And starting with you, Matthew, do you believe Kyle Busch or any other driver starting 30th or worse today has a strong shot at winning this race?
Out of anyone, you would say Kyle Busch, right? I mean, Kyle Busch is one of the greatest in the sports history, let alone someone to not win this race. Like he said in an interview with, I believe, NASCAR and Fox, he would trade his Brickyard win. He would trade a bunch of wins in order to get that one Daytona 500 trophy. And statistically, you've noticed that in the past 10 years, pretty much since like 2009, the only driver to win who started outside the top 20 in the Daytona 500 was actually Denny Hamlin in 2020. And if you look at the driver ratings in the last 10 Daytona 500s, Kyle Busch is actually third with active drivers with a 91.6 rating, which is quite impressive. And he also has led the third most laps in the last 10 Daytona 500s with 135. So if anyone can do it, it's probably going to be Kyle Busch. I mean, we saw a lot of speed out of the adult Candyman's car. I was trying to think of a nice way to answer that. But if anyone else can do it, it would be a shock. I mean, Ricky Stenhouse Jr. is a great super speedway racer. Ty Gibbs is a young rookie. I don't know, Jimmy Johnson's won here before too. I wouldn't be surprised if Riley Herbst shocked the world as well, because Riley Herbst, I think, is going to be that guy who wins an Xfinity race this year. But you never know with Daytona. Like, we could see something that happened where there's only 5 accidents. We could see something where there's 25 accidents and Cody Ware gets almost a top 5 finish again. So you never know what's going to happen at the end of the day. But if I think it's going to be anyone, I would probably bet on Kyle Busch to be the guy who comes from 30th on back. But it hasn't happened only once in 10 years, so I'm not entirely sure what's going to happen today. But definitely excited, though, I will admit.
Oh, yeah, definitely exciting, isn't it, Matthew? I'm looking forward to this race. Fantastic. It always sort of kicks off a proper motorsport season as well. We have a couple of races in January, a couple of races in February, but then everything begins. You always know towards the end of February, that's your start of the season. Everything starts week after week. There's always something to go on now as well. I do believe that Kyle Busch has got a chance of taking the win because it is a 500-mile race. So much happens in it as well. And pack racing, as we know with this car from last year, very good to keep close constantly as well. Day in the Life asked a good question there. Will fuel mileage be an issue today? Looking back to last year's Daytona 500 as well, we saw there was about 2 or 3 more stops than averaging as well compared to normal as well when they started running the new car coming in as well. So everyone was a bit unsure about how much they could push it. So I'm expecting that to sort of be a one-off or more of a normal run. But it also, as Kobe mentioned in the chat, it's going to be about where the cautions fall in between where the stages are. Now, we know they're all going to be aiming for at least 2 stops per stage. After that, with the split runs as well. So I'm going to be expecting to see the cautions mainly around 2/3 into the stages, and then it's going to start into the first stage. Then it's going to start messing up the strategy going forward. We're going to be in for a very long night because, as we saw at the Coliseum, they can crash into each other now. They know exactly how far they can push these cars. And we didn't see that big of an accident last year. There were all a few spins, a few tires coming loose as well. It was actually one of the quickest 500s I think we've had in a decade to get it done with. So it's going to be very entertaining to see. Those starting at the back, long fuel, take better stints and get forward to the front because they know they can race in the pack. It's going to be fantastic. And I think Kyle Busch is definitely one you don't want to. Another one I'm going to say as well, starting 39th, the great Jimmy Johnson as well. He's a 7-time NASCAR champion. Qualifying may be bad, but the race is an entirely different story. It's a different racecraft as well when you come into it as well. So he could still be mathematically involved. Don't know for how long, but he could be around the top 10 for sure going into the end of stage 2, start of stage 3.
Yes, for sure, Josh. On also, we want to thank Brian for buying us 3 cups of coffee on the Buy Me a Coffee. Really appreciate you for doing this, supporting our motorsports coverage. So, Brian, your name is going to be on the little graphic we got there in the corner. Joining Ed Hunter from Formula Zone, Amber, who's in the chat, and Zachary W as well. So, Brian, you'll be a fourth name there. Thank you so much. And you can always, for anyone out there, you can buy a coffee for your favorite on-air personality here at Grid Network to support us all as well. And every little bit helps us grow our motorsports media outlet. And getting back to the question itself, I do think that Kyle Busch does have potential to win this year's Daytona 500, but before he ended up crashing his primary car in the duel, Kyle Busch was actually probably going to be my pick of winner, but he's not going to be my pick of winner now. But I could certainly see him coming from deep in the field and getting the job done this year with RCR. But another driver who's starting outside the top 30, I think we really need to keep an eye on. A lot of people might be surprised I'm saying this, but he looked really good in practice, he even led practice. I think Jimmy Johnson at number 84 Carvana Legacy Motor Club, Chevy Camaro, is very strong as well. When he was drafting extremely well, the car looked really fast. And in this race, it doesn't matter where you start, is where you finish. And I think if Jimmy stays out of trouble, he could potentially be a contender. Imagine coming back after retiring from full-time Cup racing and winning the Daytona 500. I think Jimmy Johnson is definitely somebody that people are going to have to pay attention to as well. Unfortunately, Jimmy has a little distraction off the track. If you saw the Associated Press story yesterday, there were some comments made by Richard Petty, talking about the transition from Petty GMS to Legacy Motor Club. It seems like Richard Petty feels really disappointed in his lesser role with the organization. He talked about how Jimmy's brought on his own people, and the way Richard Petty's been doing things for so many years, Jimmy does it differently. So it seems like Richard Petty's, as he transitions to the next stage of his involvement in NASCAR, it seems like Richard is really having a tough time with that. And Jimmy did respond to the Associated Press article as well and said that he was very disappointed that Richard decided to air all of this publicly, and that Richard had never discussed this with him in private before. So that's a small little distraction that Jimmy Johnson Legacy Motor Club is going to be dealing with today. But Jimmy's a professional, has been around for so many years, so I'm sure as soon as he puts the helmet on, gets in the car, he's going to be locked in for the Great American Race, and he's not even going to be thinking about what happened in the media yesterday involving Richard Petty. And with Kyle Busch driving the number 8 for Richard Childress Racing and his old number 18 gone from the grid, this is the first time since 1990 we won't have a number 18 car in the Daytona 500. Ty Gibbs is in the number 54 Interstate Toyota at Monster Energy, Busch's old ride. The 2022 NASCAR Xfinity Series champion won 11 races during his 2 seasons in Xfinity. He did 15 races with 23-11 last year, replacing the injured Kurt Busch. Gibbs skipped the 2022 Cup season finale after the sudden passing of his father. Corey Gibbs, the elder rookie, was his main championship rival last year, Noah Gragson. He had 13 wins in 4 in the Xfinity Series. Gragson made 18 Cup starts last year. It's no secret that Gragson and Gibbs are not exactly the best of friends on and off the track. In the newly formed Legacy Motor Club, Gragson is replacing Ty Dillon in the number 42. Ben, could this be one of the most contested Rookie of the Year battles we've seen in a long time?
I think so, and I think that this is something that the Rookie of the Year battle really needs. The frustrating thing to me about the playoff system, or one of the frustrating things to me about the playoff system, I guess I should say, is that when Austin Cindric won the Daytona 500 last year, it was going to take Harrison Burton or Todd Gilliland winning a race in the first 26 races for us to still have a Rookie of the Year battle. So, with no disrespect to Harrison or Todd, we knew that was always going to be a stretch. The Wood brothers have only won one race since Trevor Bayne won the 500 all those years ago in 2011 with Ryan Blaney. The Front Row Motorsports team, obviously, is still a smaller organization compared to the rest. And they're both rookies who are younger than me, Cup drivers born in the 2000s now. So we knew that was always going to be a stretch for them to get a victory in their rookie seasons. Whereas when you look at Ty Gibbs and Noah Gragson, I'm not saying they're going to go out and win multiple races here each of them. But I think both of them could certainly be strong contenders all throughout the year. I think they're both in very good equipment, and they could give us one of the best Rookie of the Year battles we've seen in a long time. And this is something that we don't always get. There was a 3-year period from 2010 to 2012 where I think it was, Kevin Conway and Terry Cook were the only two rookies going at it in 2010. Stephen Light won Rookie of the Year basically by default. I think Andy Lally did as well in that time period. And again, no disrespect to any of those guys, but I think that was just, it speaks to sometimes, we don't necessarily get great talents like Ty Gibbs, Noah Gragson all moving up in the same year. We have that this year, and I think it's going to make for a great Rookie of the Year battle all throughout the season.
Yeah, and I mean, I could definitely attest to that. I think it's going to be a great Rookie of the Year battle, but at the same time, I have a strong feeling that something is going to happen like last year, where it's the way the system works. Like even when Cole Custer won one race, when Austin Cindric wins one race, it's like you're guaranteed to be the Rookie of the Year in the sport, and it's kind of an unfortunate thing. But this year we might have a chance to see both of these drivers win. However, I truly believe that Ty Gibbs is probably going to be a lot higher in the standings, even if neither of them win, just because of Ty Gibbs as a driver and the talent he has at a young age. So I think this is going to be a contested one. I think they're going to see a lot of battles, but I also feel like down the road in a few years, maybe when Ty Gibbs is like 24 years old, him and Gragson might be better friends, because I remember when Gragson and Justin Haley used to hate each other, and then they were teammates at Colleague Racing in the Cup Series last year. And I just pretty much think that it's going to be close, and it's probably going to be one of the most contested ones, because not often do we see drivers of this caliber move up at the same time. But personally, out of all the drivers moving up from the Xfinity Series, I know he's not a rookie, but I think AJ Allmendinger is going to do better than both of these drivers this season. But other than that, I'm choosing Ty. I think it will be contested, but I still think Ty will win Rookie of the Year. But I think Allmendinger, who's the Xfinity regular season champion, is going to do better than both of his previous rivals in the lower tier series.
Well, Matthew, I'm glad you brought that up. We've talked about that during the Xfinity broadcast yesterday. If you want to talk about the big three in Xfinity last year, Allmendinger was certainly the third part of that. And although he's hardly a rookie, he's got over a decade of Cup experience. He's, of course, moved up to the Cup Series as well. So we could see some great battles between three former Xfinity drivers in the Cup Series this season.
Yeah, you're definitely really looking forward to that in the Rookie of the Year battle. And Matthew, you mentioned Ty Gibbs' talent. We've said many times on the show, we believe he's one of the best, like once in a generation's talents that we've seen enter the NASCAR Cup Series in quite a long time. And the other thing he has is advantage. Joe Gibbs Racing equipment is more superior than Legacy Motor Club has right now, so that might give Ty Gibbs an advantage. But who knows? It's going to be interesting to see how Jimmy Johnson is going to be able to run that company. As I mentioned, from the AP article, Richard Petty saying that he's running things a lot differently than Petty. So over time, we're going to see if Jimmy Johnson can make this team stronger moving forward. So I was just wondering if you guys had any reaction to that article about Richard Petty, saying they kind of bothered him a little bit in his more diminished role. So Ben, if you wanted to start that, Matthew and Josh, you wanted to chime in as well.
Sure. Well, I just pulled up the NBC article. I forget if it was Nick Ryan or Dustin Long. I've already closed it out here, but I was just trying to catch up on those comments here. And, it looks like I didn't take it as Richard Petty, I didn't take it as an attack on Jimmy or anything. He just said,
I didn't either.
It's been a change for him, because he's been in that kind of role for, decades now. And to kind of having stepped back. And I think it even said, it disappointed me. And the article said he says it with a chuckle or something. So, I don't think that there's any, bad blood between these two here. I know Jimmy obviously said he was disappointed to hear that because that hadn't been made clear to him. But then in comments further down the page, he said, we've always, had a lot of love for each other. And he was the last person I fist bumped before I won my 7th championship myself at Homestead. So I don't see this as being any sort of major, there's bad blood here. This could be a distraction. This could mess Jimmy up. I think it's just they had a miscommunication in terms of how they were each feeling. It's a brand new partnership, a brand new role. You've got Maury Gallagher involved in this as well. And, there's all sorts of pieces to this puzzle that they're still trying to figure out. But I think I forget if it was Jimmy or Richard who said this, but, when you think of the equipment, like you mentioned, Kobe, we know Joe Gibbs Racing is obviously a 5-star or A-tier level team. I think it's fair to say RPM over the last several years has kind of been a C-tier level team. I think what they were saying was the goal was to make Legacy a B tier team this year and make it an A team in the future, or that Eric Jones made it a B team last year, and now with Jimmy coming in, it can be an A tier team this year, something along those lines. So I know that they have ambitions to become one of the top teams or franchises, I guess you could say, with this Legacy Motor Club name that they've taken on in the NASCAR Cup Series. So I don't see this as being a huge story at all. I think these are comments that are going to pick up some steam because obviously Petty and Johnson are both big names and new roles here, but I don't think there's really much to it. I think Jimmy's going to, be the true professional that he's always been, put the helmet on today and try to go win the Daytona 500.
Yeah, and if I can chime in a little on that too, I definitely agree with that. I think it's also great that it's not great that the news came out, but it's great that it came out before the season, because we've seen in the past, like, I think the most recent memory of like some news like this breaking where there's some sort of bad blood was the whole Tyler Reddick to 2311 announced just randomly on a Zoom call with Denny Hamlin like midway through the season without letting Richard Childress know. So kind of like that kind of threw Tyler Reddick, I believe, even though he had 3 wins, was very inconsistent down the long run. So I feel like that has a thing. But then obviously Richard Petty Motorsports, for a lack of a better term, hasn't been that relevant in this sport since he really was like the driver of the team. They haven't won much. They've been C tier, D tier, whether it was Almirola, Wallace. Eric Jones is probably their best driver they've had in a very long time. I think Eric Jones is arguably the most underrated driver in all of NASCAR, and I think we'll see this team build up with Jimmy Johnson's knowledge. You have 2 7-time champions. You'll see like 2311 only had 1 win. Then they had 2. You see Trackhouse went from no wins at all to championship 4 contender in just 2 years. So I think we'll see that jump with Legacy Motor Club from being a B, C tier type team to pretty much a B or A team. There's a lot of Chevy powerhouses. I don't think they'll ever surpass Hendrick Motorsport. It's very hard to surpass Hendrick Motorsport. But I think overall it's good that this dirty laundry was aired out a little beforehand. But I think Richard Petty will be very happy when Eric Jones and Noah Gragson are hitting victory lane a lot more than any driver he's ever had in the past, besides obviously himself.
I mean, yeah, it just reading the article now as well, it does look like he said, he was asked by the interviewer, was he irked by Johnson's rise in power? And he says, yes, it does bother me. So it's kind of like, I can see where it comes from, as not only as a business standpoint as well, to have someone else come in, run your company that you've built up, but also as a racer who, you never lose it. You never lose the urge to race. Your mind is still there, but your body just can't deal with the tolerance of racing anymore. That's why we see so many drivers turn broadcasters, because it's a way of staying in the sport and expressing your views on it as well, and just sticking around as much as you can because it is your life. So we saw that he's sort of gone down the route as team owner, and now he's lost it, and he hasn't got full control anymore. So it is like being kicked out your retirement home. So it is going to irk him, and I think it's right it's happened before the start of the season. But I agree with you both as well. As soon as that first win comes on the board, he won't care. He'll be first down there in victory lane, celebrating, saying what a great partnership this is, and going around everyone as well, shaking the hands. It'll be blown under the water as soon as it can be. So it's just one of those things where he means it, but he won't care about it soon.
Yeah, well, Matthew, just to bounce off of one of the things you said, to make a Formula One comparison here, Mercedes powered the McLaren team for many, many years, and then they came in as their own works team, and I don't think anybody would have expected that Mercedes would have surpassed McLaren like they have over the last decade or so now. So, I think with Jimmy coming in to his own team now with Legacy Motor Club, again, I don't expect it to happen, in the next 1, 2, or 3 years, but who knows? Jimmy's always been a fierce competitor, and, they get the equipment and the drivers sorted out at that team. Who knows what the future is going to hold and who's going to be the real Chevy powerhouse. They got a long way to go before they surpass 250 or approach 300 wins, though. So there is the legacy, no pun intended, part of Hendrick Motorsports that's going to take a long time to equal. But, we'll just have to wait and see. I think this is going to be a very successful partnership for Jimmy Johnson and everybody involved here. I understand we have some comments in the chat room. Hello to Casey. Good to see you, Casey. We'll see you on Encore tomorrow. Robbie Adams, good to see you in the chat as well. Day in my Life says Kyle Busch will finish ahead of Tyler Reddick. I would not put that past him at all with how he ran in the duels. Of course, he's got to be coming from the back as well. And let's see. I think we have some comments. Amber was asking where the article is. I see we put that in the chat room as well, so you can go read that over at the Associated Press. And I think some other outlets have picked up on it as well and given their own thoughts as well. So just search Richard Petty, Jimmy Johnson. I'm sure it'll pop up for you there. Now, speaking of rookies, let's talk about the defending champion of this race who won the race as a rookie last year, Austin Cindric. He's making his third Daytona 500 start. Like I said, he won it as a Rookie of the Year contender last season, although it was his second 500 start. He did run some races part-time in the 33 car for Penske in 2021. And, of course, Trevor Bayne was not a declared rookie when he won the Daytona 500 in 2011. That was the first year that we had the system where you had to choose your points for each series. So there was a bit of a question going into Phoenix for next week, I believe, as to whether or not Bayne might switch and declare for Cup points as well. So that was an interesting situation there. But getting back to Cindric, if he was to win, he would not only be the fifth driver to win two in a row, but he would be the first to do it for Team Penske. He joined AJ Foyt and Sterling Marlin as the only drivers to have their first two wins be the Daytona 500 and the first driver to have a better than 50% winning percentage at the Daytona 500 after three starts. So, Kobe, I'll start with you. Is Austin Cindric a true contender at the Daytona 500 this year, or do you see his Penske teammates having a greater chance than him to win it this year? Of course, Ryan Blaney's always been so strong in this race.
Well, Ben, as we all know, we've seen some interesting things happen this speed weeks in relation to last year. Is in 2022, Zane Smith won the truck race. Guess who won the truck race a couple of nights ago? Zane Smith. Austin Hill won the Xfinity race this year. Guess who won the Xfinity race yesterday? Austin Hill. So if we're keeping a consistent pattern, I guess that means Austin Cindric's going to win the Daytona 500 this year, so we can just have three repeat winners from trucks, Xfinity, and Cup. But yeah, I do think Austin Cindric is going to be a true contender. The Ford's looking really strong. They swept both duels on Thursday night, and as we talked about on the pre-race show, that Ford has a new nose this year. To produce a lot more drag, and it really showed on the draft as they were really looking strong. So right now, I think if you're looking at a manufacturer that could be a favorite, you certainly have to look at the Fords, and I think Austin Cindric certainly could be one of the top contenders. But his teammates, Joey Logano, getting it done in his duel, he could very well be up there. And Ryan Blaney, after coming close a few times, he certainly wants to get that Harley Gerald trophy as well. So I think Team Penske could be tough to beat.
Yeah, I mean, I remember commentating last year saying how amazing it was for Austin Cindric as well. It was a do-or-die maneuver in the last couple of laps as well. Really good stuff. I would say he is still a contender to be it. He starts on the grid as well, down in sixth position as well. Only a fraction of the time from Bowman in the 48. So he's got a good shot. But he's just sort of at the start, isn't he? Third row of the grid. It's sort of like thinking that could be where the drama starts. Does he avoid an opening lap crash? Is he involved in it? It's got to be very much on the nose there. But at Daytona starts, restarts, whatever, it's potluck whether or not you get through. So I'll say he's a contender for sure. We saw it last year. He comes alive. And this is his third Daytona 500 as well. Last year was his second, even though it was his rookie year, because he took part in the 500 the year before as a reserve driver coming in. So this should be quite fun to see how he's got it now. First time, I think he's going to race at the track for a third time in a Cup car. And it's the second time as well in the same generation of Cup cars. So you can take everything you learned last year, put it into this one, and just go again. I really hope he could do a double here at Daytona.
Now, I'm glad you brought that up, Kobe, because I was seeing that all over social media last night after Austin Hill won the Xfinity race again. It's like we never left 2022. So I guess all signs point to Austin Cindric making it a clean sweep. I believe I also saw this happen in 2008, 2009 when Todd Bodine repeated as the truck winner. Tony Stewart repeated as what was then the Nationwide Series winner. But Ryan Newman did not win the Daytona 500. Of course, that was Matt Kenseth in the 2009 edition of that race. One short correction here before we move on. AJ Foyt's first two wins in the Cup Series were at the summer Daytona race, not the Daytona 500. Of course, he also won the Daytona 500 later in his career, but just wanted to clarify that before we move on here. Now, let's talk a little bit about one single moment that can turn the entire race upside down when we go to these super speedways, and that is the big one. Last year, three crashes involved five or more cars. Lap 64 saw 8 cars in the big one, 8 cautions, and 25 cars were involved in some sort of incident during the race. Joe Gibbs Racing had 3 cars in one crash alone. Hendrick saw all 4 of their cars involved in large crashes and accidents. 15 cars finished on the lead lap, and some unfamiliar faces that were on the lead lap by virtue of some heavy contenders being taken out earlier in the race include Landon Castle in 15th, Corey LaJoie 14th, Daniel Hemrick 12th, Ty Dillon 11th, and David Reagan coming home in the top 10 in P8. Now, Matthew, we'll start with you. Could we see some drivers forego being up front and racing for stage points and playoff points and waiting till the end, which may still see some big crashes, but it could increase their chances of still being there at that point in the race?
I mean, I think definitely, right? And unfortunately, Daytona is one of those like video game like tracks where you have to race it. Like, shout out to my NASCAR Racing League. Kind of, we had our Daytona race last night. Just want to put that out there. You've got to sometimes decide what you're going to do, if you're going to run up front or if you're going to run up behind them, make your way. For these guys who are trying to win the race that don't go for the cup points, they might be up front more. But then other guys who are trying to, some of the guys who earn points from the dual races, like the guys who are starting 1 through 20, besides Zane Smith, since he does not qualify for points, they already have a few points. So maybe they could lay back a little bit and, I guess, enjoy the ride more or less. But I mean, when like some of those faces that we saw, like Landon Castle, David Reagan was a big one. I remember he was one of my shining stars at one of our post-race shows because of how great he did in that equipment, just laying back and relaxing and then doing what he had to do to get there. And I saw something too on social media. David Reagan has better betting odds to win this race than guys like Cody Ware, despite David Reagan not being in this race. So I thought that was very weird. Clearly that shows how good David Reagan did at this track. I mean, he was a previous super speedway winner twice. But to really answer the question, I think we're still going to see some big crashes. Hopefully we don't see kind of like what we saw in the Xfinity Series with Sam Mayer flipping on his roof. He made a joke saying that that's why they didn't send him the script, is because he was flipping. But I think we're going to see drivers like Denny Hamlin, who's one of the most patient drivers in this sport, probably the best at Daytona, 3 Daytona 500 wins, best average finish here, most top 10s here, active drivers. Except Michael McDowell actually is up there. I think he has 8 top 10s in the Daytona 500. I think you'll see those veterans be patient, but some of these guys, you can tell, are going to be trying to win this race on lap 1, and that might be an issue at the end of the day. But I guess we're going to see in about two and a half short hours. But that's how I feel. I think we're going to see some drivers forego being up front, but at the same time, we're going to see some guys being overly aggressive.
Yeah, Matthew, for sure. And it's always interesting coming to these super speedway races and seeing the different strategies. Honestly, it doesn't really matter what your strategy is because you could still get caught up in a wreck. We've seen drivers get turned from the very front of the field and have a big wreck start up, battling for the lead. You see it in the middle of the pack. You see it in the back of the pack as well. And, you know, when you're right in the thick of it, we like to call that the hornet's nest. Whether you race at Daytona, Talladega, and starting last year, you know, Atlanta as well. So if you're starting up front, you could get in trouble. And I understand drivers wanting to hang back, you know, not even thinking about playoff points, stage points at this point, you know, get through stage 1 and stage 2, just run at the back. And then when you get like 60, 50, 40 laps to go, then you start to move forward. So you're either going to be in the hornet's nest or you're going to have to go through the hornet's nest to try to get to up front. So that's why my strategy, you know, just go ahead and just race, because at some point, because you might get caught up in a crash no matter where you are on the racetrack.
Yeah, Matthew Owens and Matt White did say to me last year as well, I had a very easy debut commentary for the 500, very few cautions, no red flags, straight through to the end, no big one. I feel like they've cursed me though this year as well. When I got on the commentary, I'll probably be up until around about 3 a.m. my time as well, so I've got the food ready. But we could see the big one. It usually happens as well just before at the end of stages when everyone's, as you said, racing for the stage points and the playoff points that they need to go through as well, because they do start thinking about it incredibly early in the seasons nowadays. As much as we hate the playoffs as well, they happen. As much as we hate the stages, they happen. So it's going to be interesting. I think Amber said, what's the stage lengths for the 500? I replied 65, 65, 70 is what I understand it to be. However, I believe they've got rid of the if just a bit of a preview here, they've got rid of the stages for the road courses, if I'm correct, which is fantastic.
The cautions at least,
Yeah, apart from the scheduled cautions, which is good. But I think we're going to be seeing a lot of action with drivers wanting to go back early on in the race as well, save tires, save a bit of fuel, and then push harder towards the end. So we're going to see a tale of two halves in each and every stage. Closer racing, definitely going to be more exciting. And that's why I think we're going in for possibly one of the closest 500s we've ever seen in terms of the separation of the pack, because I think they're all going to be close together constantly. It's going to be brilliant.
I see we have a comment here from Joe Dexter saying it'll be interesting to see how Jimmy Johnson plays it. I would assume he would hold back. He has no worries as far as stage points as a part-time driver. Either way, rooting for him. And Joe, I'm glad you brought this up because I was just going to follow up with this point here. I think, if you're somebody like Jimmy Johnson, or, maybe Travis Pastrana, although Pastrana might want to get a little bit of a feel for the draft if he can and be up in the pack at least for part of the race. But, if you're somebody like Zane Smith, who's not running for Cup Series points, the part-time drivers in particular, there's no sense in tearing your car up in the middle of the first stage because you were racing too aggressively. I think if, there's obviously no incentive to be up there in the top 10 at the end of a stage. It might make more sense for them in particular to play it easy for the first half of the race, and then maybe in the second half start trying to get a feel for where you need to be to position yourself to make a move at the end. But I think, for full-time drivers, we were just hearing that on the broadcast during the Xfinity and truck races earlier this weekend. We've seen, how many times have we seen these playoff cut lines come down to one playoff point or 1 point to get in through to the first round of the postseason? Every stage point is going to matter here. And I think for a lot of full-time drivers, that mentality still has to be in the back of the minds, even though this is the Daytona 500. I think you're going to see a lot of aggressive racing at the end of the first and second stages. And that might be when you see drivers like Johnson fall to the back, because they know that at that moment, coming to the green and white checkered flag to end the stage is probably when we're most likely to see something happen there and get a lot of cars torn up unnecessarily. So that might be when you see them drop to the back of the pack. One driver who I don't think is going to do that, who I think is going to be up front all day, is Bubba Wallace. And Matthew, I'll hand it over to you as we talk about him here.
Yeah, definitely. And then Bubba Wallace, Travis Pastrana's teammate, actually, for this race. They seem to have a different perspective. Obviously, Denny Hamlin being the boss of Bubba Wallace, and Joey Logano even saying he's one of the better super speedway winners and racers as well. But speaking of like Bubba Wallace, last year he finished second in the Daytona 500 for the second time. The first time was back in his Daytona 500 debut with then Richard Petty Motorsports. He lost in a photo finish against Denny Hamlin. So I thought that was pretty interesting. You saw the emotion for that young driver. And now finished second again. So he's clearly been up front, never finished lower than seventh in either dual race. But the rest of the year, unfortunately for Bubba Wallace, was very, very inconsistent. And besides the win at Kansas he had in the 45 car, along with a few of the playoff races before the suspension, the rest of the season was just completely hit or miss for Bubba Wallace. And yeah, especially after that Las Vegas incident where he did get suspended for intentionally wrecking Kyle Larson. And then last weekend at the Clash, he had another fast car, but Austin Dillon moved him out of the way, which is good. That you got to do what you got to do to make some money, win races. It's a racing move at the end of the day. So this will be Bubba Wallace's third time here with 2311, another fast-looking car, a little different paint scheme, though. And again, he is one of the favorites to win this race. And since Bubba Wallace now has the best average finish at Daytona among drivers with a minimum of 5 starts, have to say that because Austin Cindric is like statistically the best Daytona driver with an average finish of 6. Do you guys, I'll start with you, Ben. Do you think there's more pressure for Bubba Wallace to win the Daytona 500 this year, considering it's his third attempt with 2311?
And considering where he finished last year, yeah, absolutely. I think he's under a lot of pressure to win it with 2311 Racing. Of course, Bubba Wallace has always been so strong on the super speedways, particularly when he rejoined Toyota and joined Michael Jordan and Denny Hamlin's 2311 Racing team. I think you heard Bubba even say last year, finishing second in 2018 was an absolutely incredible experience because I think it was only his 5th Cup start. I know he did a few races in 2017 filling in for Almirola. But nobody expected Bubba Wallace to be, running as well as he did during the 2018 Speed Weeks. And I think where you saw that RPM team run the rest of 2018 and 2019, I know they picked it up a little bit in 2020. But, like we were talking earlier at the beginning of this show, Rich Petty Motorsports historically was not one of the top teams in recent years, at least before this Legacy Motor Club rebrand. Now Bubba Wallace certainly has no excuse in regards to equipment, and he's made the most of his equipment and gotten a win at Talladega and run up front, finished second in the Daytona 500 last year, been in contention several other times to win these races. I think that there's a lot of pressure on him and that team to get the job done and go one position better today. So we'll see if he can pull that off.
Yeah, I completely agree with you as well. I don't think he's just under pressure to win the Daytona 500. I think he's under pressure to actually win more races and perform as well. Bubba Wallace has always been a character who's sort of up and down in NASCAR. One week he's great, one week he's not. One week he's one of the best drivers on the field. The other time, half the field want to kill him. But I think with the 500 as well, something has clicked. He's got that momentum to keep strong. He's got the momentum, as you said, on Super Speedways, Ben. He's got that momentum to stay focused and keep going. So I think a win is on the cards for him today. But taking a look where he starts in the field, if someone can help me out because I've got my glasses on to have a look at that field. It's going to take a while for him to actually keep going and keep strong. And he's going to have to play the stage game, I think, in order to be competitive. As I said, though, we're going to have a very interesting run where the field's going to be compacted throughout the entire. So my bet, we'll see Bubba up there around about 50 laps into the race, just for the end of stage one. He'll be right at the top, and then we'll see him constantly around there when we come to fuel pit stops.
Yeah, and definitely just to touch a little too, I think he is under the most pressure. Now you can't really make any excuses now. When you were with Richard Petty as a young driver, where he didn't really have many top 5 finishes, there you had some of an excuse. But then you go to Toyota with Denny Hamlin and Michael Jordan. You get a win where you ran up front from Talladega, going 19th the first, and then you come out, get the pole at Michigan, win at Kansas, finish runner-up Daytona. There's no more excuses now for the 23 team that maybe if he doesn't win now, he still has not made the playoffs in his career. He's won 2 races in the playoffs. He wasn't in the playoffs, though, in the Owners' Championship, but that doesn't really matter as much to the driver personally. I think he's under the most pressure this year, especially in this third attempt. And another driver, though, I want to touch on who is under a lot of pressure this season is Kevin Harvick. I mean, 22 years ago yesterday, we lost Dale Earnhardt Sr. after the tragic accident on the last lap of the 2001 Daytona 500. And for the first time, nobody that raced in the 2001 Daytona 500 is in the field. And a fun fact, I don't know about you guys, I wasn't alive when that happened. I was born in July of 2001. So seeing this transition is kind of like mind-blowing to me that Kevin Harvick is now the last full-time driver who started before I existed on this planet. So I thought that was a very, very interesting thing. But Kevin Harvick was actually initially supposed to make his debut with the number 30 team, and then he ended up goes and wins that race in the number 29 car. And Kevin Harvick actually the next year after 2001, he made his first Daytona 500 start. And now the only full-time driver that started in the 2003 Daytona 500, and it was the last of the Winston Cup era. You can say Jimmy Johnson now because Jimmy Johnson's running part-time, and his first Daytona 500 start was 2002, but it's a little bit different. And now, just like Joshua had previously mentioned with drivers, we're talking about Richard Petty, Kevin Harvick, I'm sorry, I read something else. Kevin Harvick is making his last Daytona 500 start, but like previous drivers before him, is going to the Fox broadcast booth next season. So that's going to be something interesting to see. But I'm going to start with you on this one, Kobe, about Kevin Harvick. Do you think his retirement not only signals the end of his career, but the end of a complete end of the era for the sport where no driver on the grid raced during the Winston Cup era? And do you think this could significantly impact the relationship between the drivers, between the teams, and overall between NASCAR in general?
Yeah, Matthew, it's really crazy to think about that. Kevin Harvick is, once he's gone, there'll be no driver left running on the grid full race when it was called the NASCAR Winston Cup Series. Definitely really crazy there. And, it just speaks to Kevin Harvick's longevity. He's done so many great things in the Ford. Definitely when he's up to be in the Hall of Fame, probably going to be first ballot. Harvick is certainly a world-class driver and a great ambassador as well. I know in previous episodes of Grit Tonight, we always like to talk about the voice of the garage. I think right now a lot of people think Kevin Harvick is one of those leading voices in the garage. So once Harvick retires, somebody's going to have to step up and fill that void. I'm sure a lot of people are probably going to be looking at like Kyle Busch, Brad Keselowski, even Joey Logano, as like the next leaders in the garage who are going to have to take over, because once Jimmy Johnson left, when he was one of the leading voices of the garage, it really seemed like Kevin Harvick stepped into that role and really voiced his opinion. And to answer the other part of the question, Matthew, I don't think it'll necessarily impact the relationship between the drivers, team, and NASCAR. I think, like we saw when you saw them, the Tony Stewarts, the Dale Earnhardt Jr.'s, the Jeff Gordon, and the Jimmy Johnsons left, it'll be somebody else who will have to step into that role. And Kevin Harvick, hashtag forever, he's going to try to enjoy this final season as much as he can. I'm sure he's definitely going to try to go out there today and try to make his final Daytona 500 start very memorable. And it would be amazing for him to go out on top and win the Great American Race in his last start in this great event.
I just think back to, when I first started getting into the sport around 2006, 2007, it was not that uncommon to see drivers still racing competitively into their mid to late 40s and even into their early 50s. Of course, Mark Martin nearly won a race at Pocono in his early 50s in 2012, driving part-time for Michael Waltrip Racing. So I think, and Kevin might have even been the one that said this, but I think some drivers have talked about the intensity of the playoff format and even the intensity within each of these races now, with stage racing now forcing drivers to run hard all race and kind of there's no incentive to lay in the back of the pack now, like we were talking about earlier here on these super speedway races. It could simply add to the stress that each of these drivers are going through, and we could see drivers start to retire earlier. You think about it, in most sports, it is, rare, if not exceptional and unprecedented, to see someone continue to compete at the highest level into their early 40s. I know there are exceptions such as, Tom Brady and, Albert Pujols hitting his 700th home run last year in baseball. But, NASCAR's really kind of been a sport where we have continued to see that. And like I just mentioned, Mark Martin running so competitively, into his 40s as well. Kevin Harvick has been an example of that now in his mid to late 40s. Jimmy Johnson's coming back now, but he's only part-time. And, 2003 was not that long ago, guys. I mean, we're not even 2 full decades removed from that. We won't be until the end of this season. So it is kind of remarkable to me that there's going to be nobody left very soon here from the Winston Cup era. You would think there might be somebody, who's, like Harvick started out racing in 2001, 2002, but, just was on the tail end of that is continuing to race here. I suppose we might still have Kurt Busch. It's unfortunate that his career was maybe cut a year or two short with that accident, but it really is a sign of a changing of the guard, even more so than we've had just in the last few years here with, these legends of our childhood, like you were mentioning, Matthew, all seeming to retire one by one over the last few years. Kevin Harvick really is the last of that era, and it's going to be a shame to see him go. Although I suppose we will still be seeing him on our TV screens in the Fox booth, like you mentioned. But it is going to be weird not having him on the grid. And crazy is another good word for it. I'm glad you brought that up, Joe, as well.
Yeah, and I can definitely attest. I agree with both of what you guys said, Kobe and Ben. It's just kind of that weird transition, right? Like we saw Kevin Harvick come in for Dale Sr. before I even existed. Like that is freaky. Before Ty Gibbs even existed. And that's why I wanted to touch on, because we're going to talk a little about Kurt Busch in just a second and how Ty Gibbs became Kurt Busch's replacement driver. So I'm seeing kind of a similarity. Ty Gibbs has all that potential. I believe Kevin Harvick had that potential being a young champion as well in the Busch series at the time. But I think it's definitely the end of an era, especially for me. Like I feel like a child. Like I feel so young to see that another driver is retiring before I even existed. Like that's just an incredible thing. And another one of those guys who started before I was allowed to. But first, I actually want to give a shout out to both Brian and Robbie, who bought us some coffee today. We really appreciate it for the NASCAR Racing League. Thank you guys for supporting Grid Network. Thank you guys for supporting all of us here today. So thank you again, both Rob and Brian, for buying some cups of coffee for us today. But touching on another driver I want to go into is Kurt Busch as well. We're talking about how he retired from full-time competition last year. He was also in the 2001 Daytona 500. And now we have this year 5 drivers making their first ever Daytona 500 start. Just an incredible thing to see. We mentioned Ty Gibbs earlier, but we have 4 that are not running full-time this season. And we also mentioned like Noah Gragson, even though he is a rookie, just like Austin Cindric did, had participated in races prior. We have Travis Pastrana, who's one of the greatest in his discipline, will be driving for 2311 in the 67 car today. Connor Daly, great IndyCar driver, will be driving for the money team. That had very great to see him make the field despite all the problems we discussed on the previous Grid Network shows. And Connor had the races weigh in. Travis got in on speed. Then we have two young Ford development drivers who have a lot of talent, and Zane Smith driving the number 36 for Front Row Motorsports, and then Riley Herbst driving the number 15 for Rick Ware Racing. So I'm going to start with you this time, Ben. What do you think a realistic goal is for each of these four drivers that are competing in their first ever Daytona 500s?
Let's see. Let's go through the list here. I know we talked about Ty Gibbs a little bit earlier. You know what? Just thinking back to Austin Cindric last year winning this race as a rookie. I know Ty Gibbs, this is his first Daytona 500, but he certainly has the equipment to win this race. If the cards fall the right way, I would not put that past him. But I think a good goal for him would be a solid top 10 finish. I don't think he's going to be able to be disappointed with anything more than that. Travis Pastrana in 2311, Connor Daly with the money team. These are guys coming in from different disciplines. I know Pastrana did do a full season of Xfinity back in the day, but I think for them, a good goal is just going to be to run all the laps, bring the car home in one piece, and gain as much experience as they can. I don't know if I know Pastrana said that this is a bucket list item. I don't know if he wants to come back and do this again in the future here. But I don't know that either of those guys is going into that expecting to win the race, especially Connor Daly, just because of his equipment. I think the equipment might be limiting him a little bit. The only way I see him, getting a top 10 finish in that car, unfortunately, is going to be if we have a situation like we had in the summer race last year, where we had a whole bunch of underfunded teams making their way up there. But I think for Connor, a good goal would be top 25, maybe top 20. I think that would be a great day for that money team number 50 car. And then if you want to talk about Zane Smith and Riley Herbst as well, I would not put it past Zane Smith to win this race. I know that might sound a little bit surprising, but Front Row Motorsports has done it before, and Zane Smith has done it the last 2 years in the Truck Series. So, again, you never know how the cards are going to fall at tracks like this, at a place like this. I think Zane Smith really has a shot at surprising a lot of people today, as does Riley Herbst. He's got, several laps, a ton of laps under his belt, here in the Xfinity Series and in ARCA and trucks as well. I know people don't think of Rick Ware as a top team, but they have had some strong runs here in the past on super speedways. So we'll see what they can do. But I think, not everybody in this group that we've mentioned is necessarily setting out to win this race, but that doesn't mean they can't still set goals for themselves and have a strong top 10 day by the end of it. I think that's probably going to be the goal for most of them.
Yeah, for sure, Ben. And the only thing I'm going to say about these five drivers making their first start in the Daytona 500 is to just enjoy it, because you only get to start. Your first start only happens once, and Ty Gibbs, I'm sure he's been coming down to this event for the Daytona 500 for many years, with his grandpa, and as a spectator. But it's going to be different this time, being a driver behind the wheel. So my advice for Ty Gibbs would be, just soak it all in and enjoy this, because there's going to be many Daytona 500s to come for Gibbs and especially for Pastrana, Connor Daly, just soak it in, because this might be their one and only shot to ever run the Daytona 500. Good to see Travis get in the show. I know this is something he's wanted to do for a very, very long time. He ran reasonably well in the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series race on Friday night, got some more drafting experience, so I think that's going to help him out as well. And Connor Daly made the Daytona 500 because he had literally one of the worst weeks I've ever seen for a team coming down to Daytona, and the cars, just worked in his favor with the wreck happening with Pastrana and Austin Hill in the dual race, and the money team. They've been getting their act together. Practice really helped them. Connor was up in the draft. Yeah, the equipment is still a limited factor for him, but that money team has kept plugging away. And I think Connor Daly's car is going to be much better than what it was at the start of the duels race when it was just bouncing up and down. So I think Travis and Connor are really going to have a great time today. And those Ford drivers, Ben, you mentioned, I would also think Zane Smith could be a dark horse pick to win this race. Front Row Motorsports knows how to get it done on super speedways. They bring really fast cars. You saw Todd Gilliland battling for the win in his duel. Michael McDowell's a Daytona 500 champion. Zane's a solid super speedway racer as well, so it would not surprise me if we saw him going to victory lane. And then Riley Herbst going to get some great opportunities this year to run the super speedways with Rick. So Smith and Hurst, I think, there are also other drivers who could have multiple Daytona 500s in them as well in the future, especially Zane Smith. He's one of the top young prospects in NASCAR who could be in line for a cup ride in 2024.
Yeah. And I mean, this is possible that these two Ford drivers might be the next Harvick Almirola for Stewart Haas Racing come next year, with the 4 and 10 possibly being open. Zane Smith, a lot of talk about that being the talent level he has for Ford development racing. And then along with Riley Herbst being 23 years old, a lot of talent. I think the realistic goal is, like both of you said, just have fun, really. I don't know if they're going to try to wreck someone to win this race, but at the same time, I think it's going to be great. And I also want to shout out an anonymous Buy Me a Coffee donor from NASCAR Racing as well. Thank you guys once again for supporting this Daytona 500 coverage for all of us here at Grid Network. We really appreciate it. But to go back, I think the realistic goal is just to finish the race. I don't know who's going to finish the highest out of those 4, but I think it's going to be fun. It's really nice to see Connor Daly get into the field. Hopefully they've made enough adjustments. But something talking about NASCAR big Daytona 500 65th year, 75th year of NASCAR. So I'm going to throw it over to Josh for this one.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yes, as we said earlier on, and just now, this is the 75th year of NASCAR competition as well. The 50th year saw NASCAR continuing growth during a boom era as well. The 75th seems like more of a sport in the middle of changes in the direction of the sport as well. The Daytona 500 kicks off the season once again, 36 points races, the return of North Wilkesboro as well for an all-star weekend. That's something I'm very much looking forward to. An all-new street circuit in Chicago as well, and more changes expected in 2024. Overall, where's the excitement factor for the 2023 season compared to past seasons? And I'm going to start with Ben on this one because it's a big season ahead.
Well, Josh, I'll tell you, I'm a biased local, but you're up IndyCar. Let's get Nazareth back on the schedule. That's
yeah.
But in all seriousness, great to see North Wilkesboro back. I'm so looking forward to that All-Star race. In nobody's wildest dreams did we think that this was going to come together as quickly as it did. I'm looking forward to Chicago. I know the Pinty Series up in Canada has put together some great street course races over the years. I know a lot of fans, are hesitant to the idea, but I'd say we give it a shot and let's see how it goes. And if it's a complete, disaster, then we can, always scrap it and go back to, a track like Road America or something else. But you're never going to know until you try. I applaud NASCAR for stepping outside the box a little bit and, giving us some more variety and diversity in the schedule in terms of the types of tracks we're going to. So I'm really looking forward to 2023. I will say, though, the one thing I'm concerned about is still the safety aspect of these next-gen cars. So I'm hoping and praying for a safe race today. I know there have been some more concerns about the fires, particularly Ty Gibbs out of the Clash a couple of weeks ago. Hopefully we don't see nearly as many of those as we saw last year. And, we can continue to take those steps forward. But in terms of, what we're looking forward to this season, the excitement factor is certainly higher than it's been in a long time. There's a lot to look forward to here in 2023.
Yeah, Ben, definitely a lot to look forward to. Really, as you mentioned, I'm really excited to see North Wilkesboro back on the schedule for All-Star Weekend. Been following the progress on social media. They're making some really great renovations there to make sure that the track looks brand new when we get to All-Star Weekend in May. And then Chicago, really looking forward to that street race. It's probably going to be a slam and bang affair, really crazy. And I also agree with you, Ben. Also, we're still concerned about the safety aspect as well, because at the Clash, you still have the driver saying like getting hit in the rear still hurts like it did last year, considering the fact that NASCAR made changes to the rear clip over the offseason. But, now, as we previously said, NASCAR really cares about the safety of its drivers, and they'll definitely do whatever it takes to make sure that they can continue making these cars safer and safer over time. So if we get later on in the year and we still have issues with all of these hits and stuff, and I hope we avoid more drivers suffering concussions, but I'm sure NASCAR will probably introduce even more changes in entering the 2024 season as well to make sure all of these drivers are going to be safe at the end of the day. But yeah, really looking forward to 2023, seeing how North Wilkesboro, Chicago go. I'm still not over Road America losing a day. I'm sure it'll probably be back on the Cup's schedule someday, and also looking forward to seeing, the stage break cautions go away on the road course, because a lot of people have always been frustrated because strategy on the road course, which make NASCAR road course races pretty exciting. And also, hopefully we'll see much better on track product for the short tracks and the road courses in the first year. Because typically we always saw, the road courses and the short tracks were more exciting. And then when you get to the 1.5 tracks, those are the ones, that, were pretty tame. But it was completely opposite last year. The 1.5 were actually some of the best races. And then the short tracks and the road courses, we didn't really see a whole lot of excitement overall on that. So hopefully they made some changes to the cars over the offseason that'll, correct that.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I feel like last season, even though it was the 74th anniversary, the hype I felt was just so built up. The new car, like I feel like if they waited to do the next gen car until this season, the hype around the sport would have been absolutely incredible. But I'm happy they didn't, solely because they needed to work on the safety features, and you didn't want to see what happened last season during the 75th All Eyes on You season. So I think this is definitely going to be excited. I love where the direction the sport is going. Maybe some of my counterparts won't, like just other people, probably age gap as well. The sport, I love to see where it's going. Love that mix of talent, and you don't want to have all oval races. You don't want to have all road course races unless you're one of the Formula FIA fans of that sport, or that discipline, I should say. But I just love the street course edition. I love throwing it back to North Wilkesboro, maybe Rockingham soon, maybe, you never know. But I definitely do. I think this excitement just keeps building and building. And soon, within like 5 years, I think the excitement for other things that are possibly coming as well, it'll be really through the roof for certain generations of fans. So I'm definitely excited. I mean, this is honestly, besides your birthday, can you argue that this might be one of your favorite days of the year? Not including holidays as well, but this is a holiday for me. The Sunday after the Super Bowl. Some people watch the Super Bowl. This is our Super Bowl here at Grid Network as well. So definitely excited, and I think I might be more excited than most people, but I think that excitement factor is definitely there for the 2023 season. We're celebrating 75 years of stock car racing with NASCAR, so definitely looking forward to that.
Well, Monaco, Indy, Charlotte, when those fall on the same day, that's my favorite race day of the year. But the Daytona 500 certainly is up there in terms of the big races that we all look forward to. So I'm certainly with you, Matthew, looking forward to hopefully a great race today at Daytona International Speedway. And on that note, now it's time for everybody's favorite game, Pick a Winner. We encourage you, if you're watching in the chat room, to comment with your prediction on who will win the Great American Race for Daytona 500. Get on the leaderboard here for Pick a Winner. I've got quite a bit of work to do. I've only gotten one pick right the entire year, so let's see if I can make that 2 today. It's still very early. Of course, we have over 100 races across the series we cover in the grid ranking here on Grid Network to cover. So comment again with who you think wins the Daytona 500 today. Kobe, I'm going to start with you. Who takes home the Harley J. Earl Trophy?
And before I get my pick, I just wanted to share on Twitter, Adam Limmery said that he's picking Bubba Wallace to win the Daytona 500. As for me, I'm gonna go with the driver who's already seen 2 of his teammates win the Daytona 500. And whenever it comes to the Daytona 500, it always seems like he's pushing somebody to victory and hasn't been able to get the jump done. I think this is gonna be the year of YRB. Ryan Blaney's gonna win his first Daytona 500. So all the Team Penske's drivers will have a Harley J. Earl Trophy of their own.
I've really got to pick because I'm really annoyed that Ed is on 5 points. How did that happen? How am I on 1? Sometimes or another, I think Ed's got like this magic ball and he can see into the future. Anyway, I've been thinking about this for the past hour and 5 minutes, chaps, and I don't want to go too obvious. So I'm going to go for Amarola. I'm going to go for Amarola, starting 4th on the grid. I think they could have a shot at winning the 500, but I'm really hoping that's true. I've literally gone for someone who I know is fast, reliable in the 500 marks, and I'm hoping it's going to be good. But I'm not going to win, am I? I'm never going to have another Marcus Ericsson predicting that a week before it happened after qualifying and getting it right. I'm never going to have that again. So, yeah.
And I'm going to just point out Josh's thing. I've been doing pick a winner now about halfway through last season, this season. I'm pretty sure the only sport that I have not gotten correct yet is NASCAR, and that's the sport I contribute to. So you never know with this sport what really happens. But I was thinking,
I need F1 back.
It was, I mean, last season with supercars as well as Formula One, there was 2 drivers that got a lot of points for you there with Max Verstappen and Shane Van Gisbergen. I was going to go Cindric. I was going to go Blaney, but I kind of want to be different. But I'm actually, since I'm third somehow, I'm tied up there. I'm going to stick with Bubba Wallace, I think. I'm not going to pick him much, I don't believe, this season. But I think at these super speedways, it's hard to go against that number 23 Toyota. So that's who I'm going with. But I wouldn't be surprised if Almirola or Cindric or Blaney won this race today. Or Hamlin.
Yeah, we've got several comments here in the chat room as well. Amber going with Bubba Wallace as well. So several people picking the 23 team. Jimmy Johnson, the 84, that's the 43 fans pick. And another Almirola pick as well from A Day in the Life. Of course, Josh, we all remember he came very close to winning it in 2018, so maybe he can go one better this year. Demas says Kevin Harvick will repeat on his 2007 success. And Rod Brown says Connor D inside the top 15. Is that might be referring to the pick a winner board? I don't know if we can pull that back up again. But Joe Dexter says since Bubba, Jimmy, and Blaney have been picked, I'll go Kyle Larson, creating a new love for super speedways, LOL. Well, let's see if Kyle Larson can do that. Of course, he came very close in 2017 himself. That was a year that there were a lot of drivers with fuel mileage and a situation there that could have gone either way. So, who knows what's going to happen here as we get into the Daytona 500. All right. You guys know I'm a Philly sports fan. I've been through my Philadelphia Stars in the USFL losing the USFL championship. My Philadelphia Union lost MLS Cup. My Philadelphia Phillies lost the World Series. My Philadelphia Eagles lost the Super Bowl. So I'm not only going to pick a winner, I'm going to tell you right now, my fellow Eagles and Flyers fan, Martin Truex Jr. from New Jersey, the closest driver to Philadelphia. Today, he finishes second in the Daytona 500. Denny Hamlin is going to be your winner. He's going to follow his Joe Gibbs Racing teammate home. But I've got to keep going with the theme here, especially since the Daytona 500 is on Fox and all those other events that I just mentioned were also on Fox this year. It would just be too perfect if Truex comes home second. I hope that doesn't happen. I know he's desperate for a Daytona 500 win, but in terms of what I'm actually going to predict, Denny Hamlin wins the race. Martin Truex Jr. follows him home in P2. And the 43 fan says, go Birds. Thank you. I know we're still hurting from the Super Bowl loss, but I appreciate seeing another Eagles fan in the chat here. He also says not that many Toyotas working together for them to make a dent. Well, I don't know about that because we do have 3 from 2311 this year. That's the most they've ever brought. And of course, Gibbs has 4 very strong Toyotas of their own. So I think Toyota actually has a leg up over what they've had in several years previous, only having 5 cars, maybe 6 if you want to throw a team like the Gaunt brothers in there, but doesn't get as much factory support from Toyota. But I think it could be a very strong showing for Toyota today. That's what I'm predicting. But again, I think Denny Hamlin makes it 4 Daytona 500s this year after 16, 19, and 20. He's going to win today. That's my official pick a winner prediction.
Have you and Joe Samiogo been in the same pool this week? Because Joe's picked the same one with Denny Hamlin as well. Is this year's safety pick to get you most points as well? Are you just following Joe?
Well, he's my safety pick for the 500. He's won it 3 times in the last, whatever it is, 7 years here. So, it's hard to bet against him. He always seems to find a way to be up front. And it's not just the wins. He's had, you look back at his previous Daytona 500 starts, he always seems to be up in the top 5 or at least in contention here. I want to say hello to Brian and thank you all for tuning in. I see we've got 13 people here currently watching the stream and we peaked even a little bit higher than that. So thank you all for tuning into our pre-race show for Daytona 500 today.
Yeah, definitely. And Ben, you mentioned Martin Truex Jr. potentially been the bridesmaid again in the Daytona 500. Martin Truex Jr. was one who came up short to Denny Hamlin quite a few years ago. And Martin Truex Jr. he's batting 0 for 18 in the Daytona 500. So he's looking to get it in that 19th start today and later tonight, assuming we don't get any weather delays or a super late finishing. It's Florida, so you can always get 90 minutes after the Daytona 500. We'll recap all the action from this year's edition of the Great American Race. Then Monday night, 7 p.m. Eastern Time, Grid Live Encore will react to everything that happened at Daytona and ARCA Trucks and Xfinity. Also, check out our latest episode of Life on the Grid. Ben and I interviewed an assistant producer from Dirty Mo Media, Ben Walton, who works on the Speed Street podcast with Daytona 500 competitor making his debut in the Great American Raceway, Connor Daly, and comedian Joy Molinaro. Link in the video description below. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel if you enjoyed today's program. Thank you to everyone who subscribed to us following our epic weekend of roller. Now let's see if we can reach our new ambitious goal of 1,000 subscribers before 500 on Memorial Day weekend, May 28th. Don't forget to hit the bell icon to get notifications for when we go on the air. Follow our social media platforms and visit gridranking.com. Take 5 minutes to invest in Grid Network through Patreon. You can join Colin, Mark, Deschelle, and Robin and invest in each one in the Grid Network. And also our newest Patreon supporter, David, as well. We're excited to have you join the amazing group of people who keep us on the air. Once we hit $500 per month, we can begin sending some of our members to the track more often for live reports from the track and more content that you all like. Link in the video description. If you want to do a one-time donation like we've had several people do today, you can click the link on Buy Me a Coffee to get your name on the board as well and invest as much and as often as you want. And you can even buy a specific on-air personality a cup of coffee, and they'll thank you on the air like we did today. For Joshua Birch, Matthew Bro, and Ben Snyder, I'm Kobe Lambert from the Podium Finish. Thank you all for watching. Enjoy the 65th running of the Daytona 500.
Thank you for watching us right here on YouTube. Be sure to subscribe and check out some of our other videos, including Life on the Grid, where we interview folks from the motorsports industry. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.